10 to around 6 o'clock, and each session will last for about 50 minutes with Q&A session at the end of each discussion. So there will be about like 10 minutes break between sessions so that you can take some time off for bathroom break or for the new audience to come and settle in. I will be switching between Thai and English to accommodate both Thai and non-Thai speakers ก็สวัสดีค่ะขอต้อนรับทุกท่านนะคะเข้าสู่เทศกาลวรรณกรรมนานาชาติกรุงเทพปี 2023 นะคะวันนี้นะคะเป็นวันที่2ของเทศกาลนี้นะคะซึ่งจะมีการเสวนาตั้งแต่เวลา 10 โมงจนถึง 6 โมงนะคะที่ British Club State แห่งนี้นะคะแล้วก็แต่ละเซสชันนะคะจะใช้เวลาประมาณ 50 นาทีนะคะแล้วก็จะมี Q&A session ในช่วงท้ายของแต่ละวงเสวนาเพื่อให้แต่ละท่านได้สอบถามได้พูดคุยกับผู้ที่มาพูดคุยในวันนี้นะคะแล้วก็จะมีการพักเบรกประมาณ10 นาทีนะคะเพื่อให้ได้ลุกไปเข้าห้องน้ำกันหรือให้ผู้ที่มาใหม่นะคะได้มาแบบเลือกที่นั่งจับจองที่นั่งกันนะคะ For today's first session, Can Southeast Asia Sell will start right at 10 o'clock, featuring publisher Narisa Chakrapong of Thailand's River Books, Edmund Wee of Singapore Epigram Books, and Palin Angsusing of Soy Squad. This session will be moderated by Eric Wee, CEO of Tuttle Publishing, and they will be discussing the challenges, joys, the ups and downs, the ins and outs of book publishing in Southeast Asia. สำหรับการเสวนาหัวข้อแรกในวันนี้นะคะวรรณกรรมอาเซียนขายดีหรือนาทีนี้แค่ขายได้นะคะจะเป็นการเสวนาที่ล่วงลึกตลาดหนังสือผลงานนักเขียนอาเซียนที่เผชิญความผันผวนและทางรอดของสำนักพิมพ์ที่ท้าทายนะคะซึ่งจะเริ่มในเวลา 10 นาฬิกาตรงนะคะจะนำโดยหม่อมราชวงศ์นริศราจักกระพงศ์นะคะประธานกรรมการสำนักพิมพ์ River Book คุณเอ็ดมอนด์วีนะคะจากสำนักพิมพ์ Epigram Books ในประเทศสิงคโปร์นะคะแล้วก็คุณปาลินอังสุสิงห์นักเขียนนักแปลผู้ก่อตั้งสำนักพิมพ์ซอยนะคะโดยจะมีคุณเอริกวี CEO ของ Tuttle Publishing เป็นผู้ดำเนินการเสวนาค่ะIn about 2 minutes, we'll begin our discussion. Now the stage is set and our speaker, I'm sure, are very eager to share their insights and experience. So before the discussion begins, I actually would like to share with you a little bit about our speakers. Narisara Chakrapong is the founder and CEO of River Books, which publish a wide range of books on Southeast Asian art and culture. She is the editor of Oxford River Books English-Thai Dictionary. She was the founding president of Green World Foundation. She has curated several successful exhibitions at Thailand's national galleries, the Bangkok Art and Culture Center, River City in Chiang Mai. She has also initiated the Bangkok Age Festival. The second speaker, Edmund Wee, is the founder of Epigram Books, an independent publisher in Singapore who champions Singaporean literature. He also organized an annual Epigram Books Fiction Prize, a manuscript competition that's open to all writers in Southeast Asia. Palin Angsusin is a translator and co-founder of Soy Squad, an independent Bangkok-based literary agency founded in 2020. She translated several short stories, including full story, Particle of Perpetual Paralysis. She also co-translated The Fabulist by Utit Hemamun as well. So in about 1 minute, we will start right on time. I prepared the script too long, sorry about that. But okay, let's give a welcome round of applause to our speaker, the first group of speakers today. Narisara Chakrapong, Edmund Wee, Palin Angsusin, and Mr. Eric Wee. Everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to see our humble presentation early on a Sunday morning. I wanted to preface the remarks this morning by saying when I received the invitation from Melinda, at first I thought this must be a mistake. I said, whoever heard of publishers and agents being asked to speak at a writers' conference? I said, that's completely unheard of. You know, it seems like somehow against the natural order of things. It's like putting the cats among the pigeons or something like that. I don't know quite what it is. So anyway, you're very brave, Melinda, to invite all of us today. So I hope it will be instructive and interesting to all of you to have us publishers and agents up here at a writers' festival. I've never heard of that ever happening before. In any case, we're very, very fortunate to have the two leading independent publishers in Thailand and Singapore, Narissa Chakrabong and Edmund Wee of River Books and Epigram Books joining us today, and I'm sure they have a lot of interesting things to tell us, and also the up-and-coming young agent here in Thailand, Palin Ansusing. So before I start asking them the very, very difficult and pointed questions and putting them on the spot, I wanted to give a brief introduction by way of providing some context of the two greatest misconceptions and myths about book publishing generally. But first, I want to swear everyone to secrecy because this is going to be top secret stuff. So everyone has to agree that whatever I reveal this morning stays within this room. Okay? So yeah, so nod in your head. Okay, so all of you, I know that all of you are people of your word, if not people of the word. So in any case, so the first great myth about book publishing, the thing that most people don't know is that everyone assumes today for some reason, and I don't know how this started, that book sales are declining, book publishers are going out of business, bookshops are going out of business. And I get this all the time. I'm sure all of you get it too. Everyone's reading e-books, nobody's buying printed books, young people don't read, and so on and so forth. I think there's just a confusion with the magazine and the newspaper business and the music business and so forth. Well, in actual fact, the opposite is the case. The book publishing business is extremely healthy and has been growing steadily every year for as long as any of us can remember. In fact, there was a boom during the pandemic. Book sales went up dramatically in 2020, 2021. They've come down a little bit, but they're still higher now than in 2019. And book publishers are doing extremely well. Thank you very much. So I know they're now you see they're giving me dirty looks already. I know this is gonna be murder in the bushes behind the British Club. I'm sure. It's be a nice plot for a murder mystery, right? I can see the headline in the Bangkok Post. Publisher mugged behind the British Club at Literature Festival. Assailants unknown. Was it the writers or was it the publishers? Okay. So in any case, what is more, ebook sales have been declining dramatically in the last few years. This is something also that people don't know. Ever since the publishers and Amazon came to a settlement in 2016 in which Amazon agreed to stop selling ebooks at a significant loss and essentially to stop losing hundreds of millions of dollars every year. So ebook sales in the English language market have gone down from a peak of around 20% to around 13% now in terms of total book sales. Sales of print books have shot up dramatically since then in the last 6 or 7 years. And on top of it, the number of new bookstores opening up, several hundred new bookstores are opening up each year around the world. So they're just, bookstores are just sprouting like mushrooms. People are reading more books than ever before. More books are being published than ever before. So this is the sort of dirty little secret that none of us want all of you to know, because don't tell anybody. We don't need more competition. There are thousands of book publishers out there. There's probably several book publishers incognito in this room. You turn to the person next to you and ask, are you a book publisher? So we don't want more book publishers coming into the business. But anyway, that just tongue in cheek, the business is very, very healthy. Even amongst young people, this is the question that I get all the time, is, are young people reading, or are they just spending more time on their phones? But sales of children's books, sales of comic books, I mean, these are all books, have shot up. And on top of it, one of the other little secrets that we don't like people to know is that actually ebooks, in fact, are more profitable for publishers than printed books. So it really, effectively, it doesn't matter to us how we sell the books. We sell them as ebooks or we sell them in printed form. Of course, I prefer printed books. Most people prefer printed books. But we sell the ebooks and the printed books at exactly the same price to the retailers, right? And with ebooks, we don't have to pay printing costs. So it's actually more profitable. And that's why authors also get a higher royalty rate for ebooks. So, okay, that's the first great myth or misconception about book publishing. The second one, and this is again something that I'm always mystified by, is that I think almost everyone assumes that the book publishing industry is dominated by a few major publishing companies, right? And that simply is not the case. If you look at the 4 or 5 major publishers in the world, the Penguins, Random Houses, Hachette, HarperCollins, Scholastic, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, Van Holtzbrink, they represent in total, in aggregate, approximately a third, 35 to 38% of the total number of books sold in the world every year in English. And the same is true in most other languages as well. So what does that mean? What that means is that 60% or more of all of the books that are published and sold every year in the world are produced by Narissa, Edmund, and thousands of other thousands of other small to medium-sized publishers like us. Right? This is something that people don't realize, and it's something I think that is very, very unusual about the book publishing. I can't think of another creative industry. I mean, if you think about, the fashion business or the music business or the film business, right? They're all dominated, probably 70, 80, perhaps even 90% by the very big companies. So, and there's a lot of reasons for that, which I can go into, but I think we want to move along here. But they do have, the big companies have certain advantages in terms of financial, being able to offer, the huge royalty advances. They have a huge staff of editors and marketing people and sales forces and so on and so forth. But in fact, the small publishers, the sort of the happy warriors, as I call them, really have a lot of advantages that are denied to the bigger players in terms of relationships with authors, right? And in terms of knowledge of certain niches within the market that the big publishers either are not aware of or it's just too small for them to get involved with, okay? So keep that in mind, and I really feel that this is a fundamental point and it's something that I feel, that's why I find book publishing so fascinating and so interesting, because it really is possible for smaller publishers like us to really publish high quality books that can sell, in some cases, as many copies as the books that are published by the bigger publishers, just that we don't have access to the big names, right? Because we can't pay the 7-figure royalty advances. That's basically what it comes down to. So anyway, the topic of today's panel is, can Southeast Asia sell? So I'm going to ask each of them to address that in turn. But first, I want to start with, by way of introduction to them, with some more basic questions, okay? I think starting with Narissa, I'd like to ask you, why did you become a book publisher? What are the greatest challenges that you faced over the years, especially in the early years, but even also in recent years? And how do you see your role today? What is your mission? What is your primary function as a book publisher?
Hi, so hello everyone. I got into publishing by mistake, really. I wanted to be an academic. I was doing my PhD in London, and my first husband's secretary walked out, and he said, "Oh, come on, come and help me out." And so I went and worked with him, and I got hooked, actually. I love publishing. And I think it may be in the blood a little bit because my father was a writer, a successful writer in Thailand. And so I was publishing books on toys and antique things in England. And then the marriage didn't really work out. So I came back to Thailand and I thought, hey, this is nice. I'll do some books on Thailand. So my first book was Palaces of the Gods, which was a beautiful book. And I published printed 5,000 copies, which nowadays I don't think people print nearly as much as they did in those days. And it was with Thames and Hudson, with Michael Freeman. It was very successful. And I sort of went on from there, really. And my publishing has been language-based, so both in English and in Thai. And I think that's an important point to make for me, for my market. The Thai books are very important. And I would also like to say that 80% of sales are in Thailand. So that's also another important point, which we perhaps come to later. The challenges, well, I do a lot myself. So I work extremely hard. I think that would be one of the major challenges. And also, when you hire people, if they do well, they want to probably go on to bigger and better things. And if you're a small independent company, it's quite hard to offer those sort of incentives to them. On the other hand, it's great because you really know your staff, you know your market, and I think it's a wonderful job. And I like the point that you made too, that small publishers can do as well as big publishers in some areas. And I think that that's very nice. If anyone has an idea and they want to do a book, they can't find a publisher. Actually, they can publish it themselves. And there's a huge number of, self-published books these days. Bookshops, are there more or less? I think in Thailand it's probably still okay, although we see in bookshops that a lot of space is given over to other things now, non-book items, which I think is one of the challenges that we have to face. And in the UK, well, the UK is in a bit of a bad place, I'm afraid, so I don't think bookshops are doing so well there. What do I want to do? Why did I start publishing in Thailand, really? I felt that foreigners or other people, there was a misperception about Thailand, that it was all about either food or sex or beaches. And I wanted to show that there were a lot more to Thailand than that. And that's why I did a whole series of art books at the beginning, then a series of guidebooks, and then, of course, popular culture books, which, I hope I'll get to talk about later when we talk about best-selling books. Because when I was in England, I did lots of books about popular culture, and I feel that, in a way, reflects a society even better, perhaps, than the fine arts or historic sites. So that was one of my important sort of strands. And I just wanted to show that Thailand and Southeast Asia, Angkor, for example, or Burma, I've done lots of books on Burma in the past, is an area rich in culture. It kind of falls between India and China in the sort of wider world perception. I did have a mission to want to show that it was full of history, full of art, full of beauty. So that was, I think, my main incentive.
Okay, thank you. And so, Edmund, the same questions to you. Why did you become a publisher? What are the greatest challenges that you have faced over the years? And what do you feel is your core mission today as a book publisher?
Hi. I started the first 20 years of my life as a psychologist and a journalist. I group them together because they're essentially the same. You go out and talk to someone, find out what their problem is, and then you write about it. Whether you write it for the client or you write it for the newspaper. So I spent about 20 years from the age of 20 to 40 years old doing that. And I think, on hindsight, I rather think that 20 years is kind of, the time you need to become as good as you can be. After that, you have to, be a politician or become the chairman or something else. Anyway, after 20 years, I thought I got as far as I could go in journalism in the Straits Times in Singapore. To get any higher, you would have to join the PAP. And I said I didn't want to join them, and they certainly didn't want me. So at 40, I left, and over the next 20 years, I started a design company doing graphic design, visual communication, designing books, and corporate literature. 2 years, after 18 years, I was given the Designer of the Year award in Singapore in the President's Design Award. It's the highest design honor you can get in Singapore. So, well, I thought that's as far as I can go. So and during my last year as a designer, a couple of people who had written books came to me and said, could you, we can't find a publisher. Actually, there are publishers in Singapore, but for some reason, it's a long story, but one of them, well, it's a long story. They just couldn't find publishers. And so I said, yeah, let me do it for you. And I realized at the age of 60 that I've been I've been a designer for 20 years. And I thought, it's time to become a book publisher. Right? Because even though I had won a lot of awards as a designer and even as a journalist, I think they will die with me, nobody remembers it now. But I think if you publish a book, and it's a good book, the book will last forever, right? We just have to think of Moby Dick, and, all the great books in the world, right? They are still around after, so many years. I always ask students when I talk to them, can you, in 1851, somebody wrote a book about a huge white whale. Yeah, most kids will say, yeah, Moby Dick. And some will remember it's Herman Melville. But who was the president of America in 1851? Nobody remembers, even Americans. So I always tell them in Singapore, you write a great book, you will live forever. Nobody will know who is Goh Chok Tong. So in 50 years' time. So I decided that I would become a book publisher because I have been writing, I've been talking to people, I've been writing, and I've been designing books. So I thought, well, for the last 20 years of my life, from 60 to 80, that's what I would do. So when I was 60 years old, I started Epigram Books to publish Singapore literature. So I publish mainly fiction for children, for school children, young children, and adults. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. I publish in English. And so for my next 10 years, I want to publish Southeast Asia. So the last few years, I've published Indonesians, this Indonesian novel. And I published Malaysian. This is Malaysian. This is also Malaysian. And this is a Filipino. It's hard. It's hard to sell. It's hard with the distribution. But I must have published about 10 authors from the region. And in 2015, I started a book prize, a manuscript prize for Singapore authors. And at that time, the government was saying nobody was writing fiction. Everybody is writing poetry, short stories. When I started the prize, I had 70 entries. So every year I get about 70 manuscripts. Maybe 10% is publishable, but it's quite normal anyway. And in 2019, I opened it up to Southeast Asia. So, so now I get manuscripts also from Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Brunei, none from Laos, Cambodia, or Myanmar. But all the other all the other Southeast Asian countries do submit manuscript. I suspended it this year because I ran out of money. But I hope to start next year again. So we've been doing this for 9 years. Yeah, and that's why I think we'll go on to this in the next question. Why publish Southeast Asia? I think it's very critical. I think it's important for us in the Southeast Asian ASEAN countries to know each other. Otherwise, all we know about Thailand is tom yam soup and I don't know what else, the beaches and food and I don't know, sex, yeah. And there's so much more, obviously, to Thailand, and so there's so much more to all the other countries in Southeast Asia. And you are really never going to be able to read each other and understand each other because our languages are so different. You really can't expect someone in Philippines to read Vietnamese or Vietnamese to read Bahasa Indonesia or a Malaysian to read Thai. It's just impossible. So we must publish in English in Southeast Asia so that we can all read each other and get to understand each other better. And the best person to do this actually is a Singaporean because English is our first language.
Oh, really? Okay, thank you, Edmund. And the same questions for Palin. Why did you become an agent? What are the greatest difficulties that you face in your work role as an agent? And what do you see as your core mission? What is your real, the essence of your job?
Hi. Is this working? Yeah. Hi, I'm Palin. Thanks for inviting me to this panel. I feel a little bit like an imposter because everyone's been working for 2-3 decades, but I've only just started working in publishing 3 years. So how did I get into publishing? I think by accident, like Narissa. I've been translating like short stories or essays or art exhibition texts since I was 17, 18. And I think it's quite like natural in Thailand for people who can speak 2 languages, who are bilingual, to get given or get commissioned these sort of works. So I've been doing it, for free, basically, until I got my own connections with the contemporary art world, with like the galleries and stuff. And then when I graduated in 2017, I came back to Thailand and started working on this art biennial for a year. And then I realized that the art world in Thailand has really no room for basically like knowledge production. It's mostly, focused on like objects, production of objects. But what about the discourse? What about the knowledge that we need to build from the ground up? So that's when I met my business partner, Jutha Suwan Mongkon. So we, got talking and we agreed with each other on a lot of things about the art world and, the sort of lack of discourse available for young Thai readers. So we started a publishing press. So we call it Soy. So Soy in Thai, most of you means alleyway. So it was sort of our initial mission to become this sort of connecting point between different worlds, different languages, different bodies of knowledge. And but I don't know if it was like stupid or something, but we started the press in the middle of COVID in 2020. So I mean, business wasn't good. We focused on publishing a lot of nonfiction, especially on like books on gender equality, LGBTQ rights, and intersectionality. I mean, it was successful in terms of how it garnered interest among young Thai readers who really want to, new vocabularies, new languages to talk about, these issues in Thai society, but it wasn't enough in terms of like kickstarting the business because these groups of readers are quite niche anyway. I mean, we're still doing the press, but the process has been, slow. We're only planning to publish one book a year. Okay, so how I got into agenting was the same year that we started Soy. We were contacted by the Thai author Uthit Hemamoon, who he was looking for a translation editor for a manuscript of his novel called Jutti, which has already been translated into English by an academic in Chiang Mai. So they were looking for an editor, And then when we started working on it, the translator sort of like just dropped out because she couldn't commit to the working hours, being a full-time academic and whatnot. So Uthit was like, Palin, why don't you translate it like yourself, this 500-page novel? And I was like, sure. Like I've never actually translated a whole book before, and I thought it was like, why not now when I'm like young and I have room to make mistakes, basically. So I took on the job, and then as I was doing it, I realized that first of all, I couldn't do it by myself. I need a co-translator to help me finish it. So I got Ploy Ging Chachawan involved. But more importantly, I think it made me realize, how difficult it is to basically get this manuscript outside of Thailand and to be read by international readers. Because if you're a translator, your job is not just to, do the translation, but it's your job to pitch the book to foreign publishers and to promote it afterwards. And you're only able to do this if you have the connections. I think in previous years, you see quite a few Thai books being translated and published by foreign publishers, like Prap Da Yun by Pi Mui Phupok Sakun, or like Wilaporn by Pi Kong Riddi. And they are the individual translators who spend time and work accumulating these connections to the publishing world. And like in reality, not everyone has the time and the money to be able to do this. Translation is not a rewarding job. Like the hours you put in is hugely disproportionate to what you get, and you don't even know if the book will sell. So yeah, this is like the problem. I think like the underlying problem. It's not that there's not enough translators. It's just translation is not recognized as a proper job and that feeds you. And I think we can talk about this later and how the government should sort of, sort this out. Support, yeah, I mean, yeah, we will, individual translators have tried, and our efforts will, not be in vain, but it is never going to be sustainable. Like Thai literature is never going to be a sort of cultural asset with economic value like K-literature, K-pop, if there's no state support. So this is probably how Soy Literary, so the name of our agency, came about through, basically this first book by Uthit Hemamoon. And I mean, now we've only successfully represented 2 titles. Okay, yeah, but. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Palin. Now, I'd like to ask Narissa to present 1 or 2 of her books, which have been bestsellers for her or have sold very well, but which she really didn't think were going to sell when she first started working on them. and to talk a little bit about how those books came about, how you met the authors, what you thought, how much of the input came from you, how much came from the authors, and then how the whole thing developed, and then why do you think it was much more successful, or the books were much more successful ultimately than you suspect that they would have been? Because I find this is one of the most interesting things about publishing as a business, that we never know. We really never know how the books are going to sell. Okay, that's sort of the third secret about book publishing.
Okay, well, the first one I want to talk about is this book, Very Thai, and the author's sitting here actually in the front. And I can't actually remember how we met, but you came to me with the idea, and his ideas were sort of left of field at that time. You know, one of the famous aspects in the book mentioned is tiny pink tissues, and everyone latched onto that. But basically, he looked at various things that made something very Thai.
And did you immediately think, oh, this is a great idea, or at first you were a bit suspicious?
Because I had done books on ephemera in England and I liked popular culture, I was receptive to it, but I had no idea whether it would be successful or not. I thought it was worth taking a punt on it. And so it has been extremely successful. The first edition probably was reprinted 5 or 6 times. In those days, as I said, we print more, so probably 3,000 each time. So that's, you know, maybe 20,000 of the first edition. And then there was a revised edition here in 2013. That's also been reprinted 5 times. I mean, Phil is sometimes quite slow to get things done. So we really, we really want to have a third version because, you know, it's 10 years since this version was done, and a lot has changed. But I think it did really well because people were sick of, as I say, sort of high culture. People wanted to know about more basic things. They wanted to know about all kinds of things. And this is an encyclopedic book, really. And for many years, I mean, it's something that any stranger coming to Thailand would be told to read this book. And there's been a lot of spin-off exhibitions, both in London, I think there's been one in Italy, lots in Thailand. And, you know, Phil has given talks all over the world. He goes and talks to the American embassy very often. So I think it's a sort of essential primer. It's also been translated into German. I had terrible arguments with the German publisher because German language makes more, you know, it's more text. And the type is already very small. I mean, Phil is not a succinct writer. He wants to tell you everything about everything. But I think that's
how well has it sold outside of Thailand?
Quite
what was
well
that,
outside.
80% of the sales have been in
Yes,
Thailand,
yes.
and how much? And about 20% outside.
Yes. I mean, that's my split. I've looked at all my books, and that tends to be the split. The only exception, actually, is the novels, which probably Memories of the Black Rose Cat by Veerapong has sold well outside Thailand, and also The Blind Earthworm. But I mean, when you think about the number of books that are published outside, you know, every week, and trying to get, and it seems to me that you get reviews in certain newspapers if you have connections. And I would rather make the sales here, and it's better for the authors here because the contract is signed here, their prime royalty is here. So when they always say, oh, I want to be in every bookshop all over the world, I say, well, you know, you're only going to get 10% of 30% at best. So wouldn't you rather sell your book here? I mean, that's a secret that people don't always know about. So when they sign the contract, they want to be famous. But if you're going to be an author, you need to decide whether you want to be famous or make some money.
Right.
And
very good point. And since we have the author here, did the sales fulfill your expectations for the book, or what expectations did you have going into this? Okay. And was it difficult from your perspective to convince Neilson to publish it? No, not at all. Okay, good. Now, what about the booksellers here in Thailand? Was it difficult to convince them that this is something that
No.
would actually work?
No, everyone loves it. I mean,
They
Asia
loved it,
Books
okay.
this year, they came and begged me. I said, but I'm waiting for Phil to revise it, to do a third edition. And they said, no, please, please, we need the book now. So I immediately reprinted 2,000 copies, and I'll probably reprint again next year. So this is one of my bestsellers. And then
Okay.
the other one I want to just mention, because I mentioned I publish in Thai. This is my father's book, and this is the first and second volume of his autobiography. He died when I was 7, so I didn't really know him at all. But this book, I think this is this is the 70th anniversary of it. But I probably reprinted this in this sort of format with lots of pictures 20 times. Yeah, so I reprint this every year or every 18 months as well, and this sells very well. This is these two books are like the mainstay of River Books in a way, in the two different languages. And I mean, being really mean about my father, everyone says the best author's a dead author because they don't give you any trouble. But I mean, he's been amazing, I mean, really. And I had no idea whether it would do well when I did it for the first time. I wanted to do something to honor his memory because, I haven't known him and I live in this lovely house that, was his and everything. And so it came out of a sort of filial side of it, wanting to do something for him. But then it's been incredibly successful. So thank you.
And are people very surprised when you tell them that these are two of your best-selling books? I mean, because you've published so many wonderful, the big coffee table books that you're well known for, and all sorts of other travel books and so forth. So what do people assume
Oh, they don't.
that are your bestsellers? It's probably not these two, right?
I think we publishers may think that the general public are more interested in the publishers than they really are. I mean, They want the books, really. They don't care whether they've sold 10 or 10,000, I don't think. So I don't think people make any assumptions. They probably just assume that I'm sitting in my house doing nothing. I think that's one of the assumptions.
Right, having 3 martini lunches, right? Which is what we should be doing, right? This is what according to the old traditional publishing model. Maybe we can get back to that with once AI comes in, we can let the computers write the books and sell the books, and we can go back to having 3 martini lunches. Okay, Edmund, so what are some of the books which really surprised you in terms of the sales results that you didn't really expect them to become bestsellers for you when you first published them? Or did you know already when you published them that they would be?
No, I don't think any publisher knows what's going to be a bestseller. Greatest example is Harry Potter. Yes. This is apart from middle grade books that I've published and in series that have sold 100, 200,000 copies. Okay.
How did this come about? How did you meet the author?
Some years before this book was published in 2015, this is called The Art of Charlie Chan, Hock Chai, the only Singapore book ever to be on the New York Times bestsellers list. He has won 3 Eisners, which is the Oscar of the graphic novel world, and no other book has ever won more than 3. Well, in Singapore, when we publish a book in fiction, we print 1,000 copies. If we can sell 1,000, we're lucky. We don't make money, but we'll still lose money. But 2,000 we try. This book has sold 35,000 in Singapore. It's quite controversial. When I submitted the manuscript to the Arts Council for a grant, they thought it was a great book. I mean, they gave me some money. And when the book was published 2 years later, they were shocked it was published. And they
wasn't what they expected.
Yeah, and so they took back the grant. They tried to ban it, and after some negotiation, they tried to cancel the launch. And I told them it was too late. Eventually, the book was allowed to be published with stickers over their logo. And anyway, the book has and the grant had to be returned to the government. But the book has gone on to become, in my opinion, Singapore's most famous book. It's been translated into 10 languages. The Russian one is kind of stuck because of the Ukraine war. The Japanese translation is going on. It's been translated into Thai. It's been published in Thailand by Silkworm in Thai, and all the European languages except German, Italian, French. So 35,000 is just in Singapore. The rest of the world, I don't really know. It's controversial. It's about the history and development of Singapore, but not from the government's point of view. From slightly left and slightly different. It's an outlier. In Singapore, most books sell between 1 to 3,000. If you're lucky, maybe 5,000. But for adult books, not the children's one. Children's, you can sell quite a lot. But my bigger interest is in trying to get books sold outside of my country by other people. Right? So, like this book, The Accidental Malay, is published by a Malaysian, it's written by a Malaysian woman. I published it. It has sold no more than 1,000 copies in Singapore, maybe 700. But in KL, he has sold 5,000 and still selling. Similarly with this Marriage and Mutton Curry. I met an Indian publisher in Malaysia at the Jakarta Book Fair. And he said, when I mentioned this book to him, he said, oh, every Indian in Malaysia has read this. So it's selling, I don't know, maybe now more than 5,000, still selling in KL, mainly in KL. But, so how do you get an Indonesian book? I can't get this into Perry Plus, by the way, since Eric is here, I'll mention this. This is an Indonesian book about a girl in Indonesia looking for love in all the wrong places. But it's a lovely, lovely story. It's called Love, Lies, and Indomie. It's got a very Indonesian title, but I can hardly sell this in Indonesia.
We will sell it for you, Edmund. I promise you.
And I think if you put it in the airport shop, everybody, when you travel, you want to read about another country that you're in, right? And so.
When was it published, by the way?
I can't remember, 2-3 years ago.
2-3 years ago,
Yeah,
okay,
maybe.
okay.
Anyway, what I want to see is for people in ASEAN to read about each other. And you can only do that in English. But the distribution is a big problem, right? To get the books there. I published a Thai book by Sunisa Manning. That's her married name, but she's a Thai. Her book is sold in Kino in here. And it's going to a second printing. But in Singapore, I can hardly sell it. Oh, the title is A Good True Thai. Oh, Thai. If you're a Singaporean, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I'm only interested in Singapore, maybe a bit of Malaysia, and then UK and US.
All of the publishing markets in Southeast Asia are very fragmented, which is one of the
so
big,
we
big
must
problems.
do something to create this. I was telling I'll finish after this. At yesterday's talk on.
We're running out of time. We need to give Palin a chance to speak.
I was telling the audience that there are 67 million people in the UK. There are 71 million people in Bangkok, in Thailand. The writer in UK, when he or she is writing her novel, isn't thinking, how do I make my book more international so that the Thais will buy it? No way. But why are Thai authors always thinking, how do I make my book more international so that the West will buy it? Yeah, I know you want to be famous in the West. It's a much bigger market. But really, you have 71 million people. If you write well in Thai for your own market, you will sell. It's just like in Indonesia. Indonesia has 260 million people. If you write a good book, Andrea Hirata's Rainbow Troops has sold 5 million.
Yeah. So
Write for your own country.
So Southeast Asia does sell.
Yes, in your own country, in your own language.
In your own country, in your own language.
Of course, you will sell. The problem with Singapore is we have, 5 million people, and 1 million of them are from China who can't read English. So yeah, in Singapore is that we have a small market, but in the rest of Southeast Asia, you have huge markets. Philippines is 1 million people, 100 million people.
100 million.
Vietnam is 100 million people. Thailand is 70 million. Malaysia is 33 million.
Yeah.
They're all huge markets.
I think this is a very important point. So, Pauline, we have only a couple minutes left. I don't know if we have any time for questions, but maybe you can give us a quick summary of the books that you've worked on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like what? Yeah. So this is the Thai title is called Jutti, which in Sanskrit it means to die and be reborn again. There's no English equivalent for that word. You can't. I didn't really want to name to title it like rebirth because that would sort of completely erase the element of death. So we sort of decided to just retitle it into something completely different, and it's called The Fabulist. And
It's a great title.
oh, thanks. So it's about it's a novel that follows 4 generations of one family in Saratburi, Thailand. And it's divided into 5 different episodes, and each episode has their own narrator from the different generations from the same family. And the way they recount their family history and their personal history, as well as the nation's history, sort of diverges and conflicts each other. So I guess that is the point of, the Fabulist, and it's asking the questions about who gets to tell the story, who owns the story about a nation, basically.
And it's been published by
Penguin, Southeast
Penguin.
Asia.
And
yeah.
was it difficult to find a publisher
Um,
for
to-
the book, or did you propose it to many different
We-
publishers and
yeah.
get rejected? And how did you finally get the?
We proposed it to 3 or 4 publishers, 2 in the US, 1 in the UK, and then the Penguin in Singapore. I think they're the first one to respond within like 3-4 months. And I had to send a translation sample of the first book. Yeah, but it's been like a
And
rough
you know how many?
journey.
You don't know the sales results yet, right? It's
Not yet.
just been published recently.
It's been published in April.
In April, okay,
This
okay.
year.
Okay, well, that's really fantastic. I guess we have 2 minutes left, so maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Maybe. If anyone has a question?
And I agree with you that Very Thai is really the #1 book for high-end tourism in Thailand. Everyone who wants to know why you want to come to Thailand and have an interesting time here reads Very Thai.
Yes, I mean, Very Bangkok is a lovely book. It came out just before the pandemic hit, which I think was very bad for it. But so it hasn't done as well yet, but it's completely sold out now. I mean, there are a few copies on the stand today if anyone wants one, but I mean, those are the last ones. So again, Phil and I need to talk about whether it needs some revision or not. But I want him to concentrate on Very Thai 3rd edition first. He's not allowed to do anything else.
Okay, one more question? Is there any state support in Thailand?
I would say that's very minimal, like almost none. Like because I think, okay, with this one, I have to say that it is partially like my translation fee was partially supported by the OCAC Ministry of Culture grant, but it's only because that Utit won the Silapathorn Award. So not many writers will have the chance to win an award, and there's a lot of politics involved to be recognized by the state as as an award-winning writer. So I don't think there's any sort of like proper infrastructural and long-term support for writers as well as translators in Thailand at the moment. I mean, they're doing the soft power committee. I don't know how that's going.
Well, they've just started. I mean, I got a grant for translating something from into English. So in France, there's definitely something that you can apply for. There's a government department that gives grants, and they're quite good grants. I mean, it would cover a lot. I mean,
Yeah, most countries have. Singapore has some grant money available. Okay, well, we're out of time. Oh, okay. So we have another 5 minutes for more questions. Yes, Gwen.
Someone briefly mentioned AI, and the idea that you could let AI write all your books and have martinis all day while AI does the work. But
I'm joking.
Yeah, I knew you were joking, Eric. Yeah, but actually, I was just interested because as a journalist, AI is having huge impact on our industry, and I was just wondering, from everything from editing to just you can't ignore it. I know a lot of you up there are sort of more traditionalists. Like me, I like paper, I like books, but how are you grappling with the impact of AI?
Well, if you want to know my quick take, I think most of us really have no idea, and we don't know what's going to happen, and we're not worrying too much about it. But I just tell you quickly that when AI books start to become bestsellers, and then the courts rule that on behalf of all the authors that the royalties have to be distributed so that every writer gets tens of thousands of dollars, then we all can go back to having 3 martini lunches, and the authors can sit down and read all of the books that they have piled up in their libraries that they haven't had time to read, rather than being tied to the computer writing them, and let the computers do all the writing. So that's just my facetious approach to what's going to happen.
Can I just mention that if you go to, you can send manuscripts to Amazon, and they do publish books now. But if you go to the Amazon site now, they have it's not warning, they have a statement there saying, please we will not publish more than 3 books a day from you. We will not accept more than 3. So people are actually writing novels using AI and submitting hundreds of them to Amazon. And Amazon says maximum of 3. So it just tells you this is what's happening.
Yes. And of course, authors are very worried because they realize that their work is being plagiarized essentially by the AI.
I don't think authors are worried that the AI is going to write better than them, but they are worried that their works are being plagiarized and being trolled, right? And for copyright reasons. But I don't know. The machines are good.
Any other question? Yes.
I'm wondering, like, for the Western market, what's the perspective of looking into Southeast Asia? Like, what kind of genres are being focused on? What is kind of being seen as like I know that Southeast Asia is a huge market and there's like lots of different cultures, but are there any specific trends that or genres that are being kind of looked at in particular for Southeast Asia?
I'm not sure, but I think in America, if you're writing about Vietnam, they're not interested in Vietnamese stories. They're only interested if it's about the Vietnam War or, after effect of the Vietnam War. But if you're talking about, so it's all quite, I don't know, I'm a bit cynical about the West. It's like when you look at the Nobel Prize. I mean, the Nobel Prize for Literature basically says only white men can write. And that's ridiculous, right? So I'm, as part of the ASEAN Book Publishers Association, we're trying to start an ASEAN Prize for Literature. We want to say, we can write too. And we may not write in English, but we can write. So I don't know. There's all kinds. I'm a bit skeptical, that's all. Yeah, I think the interest is transitory, after a while. Or some of the stories would be immigrant stories, right? The immigrant story, which is okay, yeah. But they're really not interested in your country. Sorry.
I'd like to thank all of the panelists And thanks to all of you again for attending today.
Thank you very much for our speakers for sharing your insight and experience with us today. So they will be making their way to the Neilson Hay Library courtyard if you would like your book signed. If you will not be attending the next session, kindly make your way outside. And for the next session today with Dr. Ton, we will start a little later than the scheduled time. We will start about 11:10. So it's only for the next session that will be a little later than the schedule. Other than that, the following session will start right on time. So if you're interested, please come back at around before 11:10. ก็สำหรับวันนี้ก็ต้องขอบคุณทางสปีกเกอร์ผู้ร่วมเสวนาที่มาร่วมกับเราในวันนี้นะคะสำหรับเซสชันถัดไปเนี่ยเราจะเริ่มช้านิดนึงนะคะจะเริ่มจากเวลาเดิมเราเริ่ม 11 โมงเราจะเริ่มเป็นเวลา 11 โมง 10 นาทีนะคะระหว่างนี้ถ้าท่านใดสนใจที่จะให้ผู้ที่มาร่วมเสวนาได้เซ็นหนังสือนะคะก็สามารถเดินไปที่บริเวณคอร์ทยาร์ดของ Neilson Hay Library ได้นะคะ